Hello everyone. In today's video we will set up parkour, or free running. This has become a popular game mechanic with the Assassin's Creed series. The goal here is to set up a similar semi-realistic parkour. Disclaimer here, I am using my own animations that are available on the asset store to achieve this. So yes, there is definitely some self-promotion in this video. The link is in the description. If you have different similar type of animations, you can follow along, but you will definitely need to play around with the values. Furthermore, I would like to clarify that this is not using the upcoming traversal module. We're just using Core Game Creator here. Before we start, I would like to of course thank all of my Patreon supporters, and I have given away a free animation set voucher to a random Patreon as a prize. So this is going to be a long video, so in order to simplify things a bit, I've added this entire scene in the description, so it will already have the objects including their triggers, so their box colliders. So this will make things quite a bit easier for us. For all of my Patreon supporters, I've added a different one on Patreon, which is basically this one. So it will already have the scene including all of the game creator actions. All you need to do is simply drag in the animations in the right fields. So a bit simpler as a way of saying thank you. Anyway, let's get back to our setup. So what we'll be doing here is a lot of cinematic action as well. So I didn't simply just want some parkour actions, I wanted it to look good at the same time. So what we're doing here is we're creating different camera motors for every action as well. I've taken this inspiration from Assassin's Creed, just like a lot more really. But in Assassin's Creed, and specifically Assassin's Creed Unity, when you vault, slide, jump, etc., the camera changes as well, just to either capture the movement better or to make it a bit more intense. Now, before we start all of this, I want to make sure that once you go to your, where are you? Animations, parkour animations, there we go, that for actions like sliding, we actually change these. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos on animations, you will most likely always need a offset. And this offset is necessary, otherwise you'll hover slightly above the ground. So you need to make sure that is turned on for, well, basically most rolling as well. So yeah, that's a small thing that has nothing to do with these animations specifically, just general animations. I've always needed to change the offset always, otherwise you'll slightly hover above the ground. Now in my earlier videos where I use some animation clips from different animation packs, whenever I use them I was slightly hovering above the ground as well, so you need to make sure that you have this offset. Now for these animations it's 0.1, so just want to make sure loop shouldn't be on by default, just make sure it isn't. So that's it. So let's get started. Now we're going to add several camera motors here, so let's go to camera motor. So this will be the default one, a normal camera motor here. Going to add a small offset. This is a personal choice, by the way. You don't need that, but it's something most third-person games do. Going to zoom in a bit more, and I don't want manual control zoom. If you want that, just leave this back on and that's it. I'm not a big fan of that, but again, a personal choice. Now I'm using HDRP, by the way, so let me make this look slightly less weird. Let's drag in that sky and fog volume. And there we go. That looks a lot better. So we'll be duplicating this camera motor quite a bit. I'm not entirely sure how many I need. I'm just going to add a couple here from the start and we'll see. Now again, this is not something that is necessary, but it's something to make everything just look a tiny bit better. So this is going to be slide. There we go. So this is our slide action. And what we're doing with sliding is because we're going under, we want the camera to move under with us. So really small change, but I just want it to be a bit lower because we're actually going under. So it will follow the player. So small change, but it will have a good effect. Now, when it comes to field of view, I want us to be slightly closer to the action. So 60 is the default. So here, 60 will be the default. I want this to be 50, just a bit closer to the action. Now let's do roll as well. So this is going to be the roll when we actually jump off something. And because we'll be, well, if you're too close to the action with rolling, basically, you won't see most of it. That's what it really comes down to. So I'm going to make a small change here. Now, next up we have vault. So with vaulting, it's a bit of the opposite. So with vaulting, we're going to go for the same 50 again as for sliding, but with vaulting, we need to go a bit higher because we'll move higher. So small change, and then we have climb. Now climbing will be used for different scenarios. So we have climbing over, which is basically a form of vaulting, but actually just climbing on top of something and will be moved in a different direction. Now in order to follow this properly, we need to change a couple of things as well. So I'm going to do a 50 here, and this needs to be quite a bit higher. So this will be 3. And it's because we're actually moving along. Now the trick with climbing, Game Creator doesn't support climbing by default. So we're going to do a lot of trickery here, and we're actually going to move the player to a different position. But during this animation, the camera will move along. So we're pretty much teleporting, but during that time, we'll see an animation and it looks as if we're climbing. So yeah, sounds a bit complicated. That's because, quite frankly, it is. It took me a while to figure all of this out, to truth be told. Then we have jump. Now, this is, I would say, the most optional one. I'm really following Assassin's Creed type movement here, which means there is no actual jumping at all. So in Assassin's Creed, once you hold the run button, you will automatically perform all of these actions. That's what we're doing here as well. And the same goes for jumping. So that means no manual jump button, just you have to make sure you're actually running. So yes, we're going to follow that along. This is completely optional, going to be completely optional though. But for now, I'd say just follow along, and you can turn back on manual jumping if you want to. So I'd advise to follow along and just see whatever you prefer. It's completely up to you. So let's start with our player. So nothing special about the player. We're going to make sure all of the parkour actions are in its own empty here under the player. Don't want to make a big list in the default category, because if you have melee, shooter, etc., it will already be quite a long list. So we're going to house all of these actions somewhere else, just like I did with swimming and gliding, etc. Now there will be a couple of triggers here. So this trigger will be for running, so you'll have a manual run button, like, well, basically how most games do it. To be fair, most third-person games have a manual button for running, but in our case, running will do more than just running, basically. This will be the same button that will automatically perform these actions. So the goal here is not really to have a platformer, but to have freedom of movement, which is something I always really enjoy in games. going to drag that in. I'm going to do change property here, and the player can run. That's really it. Just press L a couple of times to get to left shift a bit faster. There we go. We can just copy this one over, actually, it's a bit faster. There we go. So if you hold the button, we can run. If you let go, you'll stop running. So you'll finally get to see those walking animations Game Creator actually has, but you won't see by default, because we're always running by default in Game Creator. Now this, I'm going to tie this to the spacebar, and I know spacebar is jumping, so you can tie this to any button you want. For the purpose of this, I don't want manual jumping. I want it to be, well, again, like Assassin's Creed, but that's optional, so completely up to you. Just tie it to a different button if you want manual jumping to be in there. Now for this one, I am creating a different action list simply because we'll need to do a bit more here. It's not just one action, so that's why I'm adding a different list. Now before we set all of that up, there's a couple of things we need here. So which is, where are you? Other marker. Now let me already drag that player away from here. These markers are going to decide where we go during our actions. And the reason we're doing it like this is because basically once we vault, slide, climb, etc., we're moving the player. So we're going to use the move player or move character option. If you set this to default locations, that will mean that if you vault exactly from the front, it will work. If you're in an angle, you'll reset to the same position here, and that's not something I want. If you go straight or in an angle, you should just go over. Now in order to achieve this, we're using markers. So markers will basically decide our position. So I'll explain these values in a bit, just follow along for now. So this will be the marker for vault slide, giving them a double name because it's the same one we're using for vaulting and sliding. And you'll notice that as well in a bit, that vaulting and sliding is actually pretty much exactly the same. It's not really a difference, just a different animation. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Here we have climb. So for climb, it's going to obviously be different. So with climbing, we are going to go up. Let's make sure all of these are turned on so we actually see them as well. And we'll have another one, which will be jump. Now the first climb is actually, let's call it climb over, because that's what it really is, which basically is just a different type of vaulting. So we're actually vaulting this object here, we're not really climbing. For this one we are really climbing, so these values need to be quite a bit different. So let's call this climb on. There we go. And this will be not that high, a bit higher, because we're actually going to move in an upwards position. So yeah, quite a bit different here. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to, do I have them all, by the way? Pretty sure I forgot to set one up. Oh yeah, sorry about that. So we have jump as well. Now again, this is the optional one. If you want manual jumping, you can actually ignore this, But yeah, just follow along for now and then decide afterwards. So these are our actions for the spacebar, which in my case will be rolling. Again, that's something I like in parkour type games, but completely up to you. So we're going to do a state change here. Going to move. So this is the first time we'll use the move character one. Going to add a wait, 0.5 seconds. And we're going to reset state. There we go. Wait until arrives needs to be turned off. That's quite important actually. And we'll use the jump marker for rolling as well. Now let's drag in that first animation, which is roll. Now the roll animation is a blend animation. So whether you're using My Locomotion Movements or Game Creators or any other, it will blend in, so it will look good. Don't really need to do much for that. Cool. So that's these actions set up. Now let's set up our first actual vaulting. So we go to scene again, and we're going to set this up. So let's add a trigger here. And we're adding a condition. Now this condition will decide if we're actually going to perform vaulting or not. So if we are running, so if we're holding our left shift, we will vault. If we're walking, we'll just walk against it. So it will just be a random object. Now these conditions and actions will be pretty much the exact same for this, this, and this. So we'll just copy this over and make a couple of really small changes. So don't worry if you're shocked by how long this list will be. It will be the same for the other vaulting and the sliding. So really similar actions here. So not that much you need to set up, which is a good thing. So our condition here going to be input based, mouse button. If the left, no, not mouse button. There we go. So if left shift is being pressed, then we can perform these actions. If not, we're not doing anything. So let's create those actions, and we're setting these up all manually so we can copy them over for everything else. I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and this will be our list. Now first things first is we're going to change property during vaulting, sliding, etc. Our player is not controllable. Again, this is what most of these types of games do. So during that animation, you can't actually change anything. You're watching the animation until it's done. So pretty important to know. This is not some strange limitation. This is actually a normal game thing. So this will be the small vault. So vault small. I'm going to drag that in. And I think because of the speed of the small one, I actually turned off the transition time. We'll see if that looks good. You can always change that afterwards. And here where we objects, nope. So what we're doing here, and this is I think the important part, is we're actually turning off the collider. So box collider is going to be turned off. So during this animation, the collider is off. Once the animation is over, collider is back on. So that's what we'll set up as well. Now the nice thing here is that all of these objects, all of the triggers are separated on purpose. They're not part of the actual object, so you can easily change this mesh to any object you want. So if you want a fence, if you want, I don't know, a cart, whatever it is, just change the actual meshes. That's it really. So you can just drag this trigger. If you have a really long fence, all you need to do is just, make the collider bigger. pretty simple. So you just drag it out all over the fence. So that's the reason why this is separated, because the mesh doesn't actually really matter at all. It's all about the actions and the collider. So let's continue. So here we are going to do some camera action. We want to change the camera. And this is vault. There we go. Adding a small transition time just for it to look a bit smoother. Just makes it look a bit better. And our player is moving to our marker. Where is our marker? Vault slide. Wait until arrives is turned off. There we go. I'm going to wait 0.5 seconds. So that's why wait until arrives is off, just like with rolling. This basically, all of this happens during that 0.5 seconds, and then after we're basically going to reset everything back. So reset our player. Can copy over this one. Going to go back to the default camera motor, and we can copy this one over as well. Our player is controllable again, which is nice. Going to wait, let's do 0.5, not too long. And then we're going to, let's just copy this over again as well. And we're going to turn the collider back on. So these are all of the actions. I know it's quite a lot, but yeah, it is really necessary to perform all of these actions. But as you can see, all of this happens within a second. So it seems like a lot, but it's not really. So let's hit play and try this out. And it doesn't look all that great. So reason for that is because the main camera motor is not assigned. Let's do that again. There we go. Now, as you can see, there's, a blur and depth of field and all of that. That's related to the post-processing. If you turn that off, all of that is gone. So again, that's completely optional. It's completely up to you if you want that, yes or no. Let's just turn it on for now. Now, we're walking, we're no longer running. If I hold shift, we're running. With space, we're rolling. And that's it. So we're going to hold left shift, going to run, and we're automatically vaulting. And that's it. So really simple, really straightforward. Now, reason we needed to test this is because we are just going to copy this over for the next couple of items. So we needed to make sure this worked properly so we can reuse it for the next ones. So obviously we need to manually create a trigger here. That's not something we can just copy over. So here we go. On player enter. That's going to be the same as this. Let's copy this and paste this inside. Going to, I think you do need to press here. That's a shame. Let's delete this one and we'll drag in our new conditions. Now these conditions are here. It doesn't really matter. I just like to move them along just to make sure they're grouped together. Now we only need to make a couple of small changes here in the actions. So player is controllable, same. Layer state is vault small. This is going to be the bigger vault. So let's do vault big. And in order for this to look slightly better, because it does take a bit more time, I did actually have a small transition time. So we're doing 0.15. You can play around with this. I'm sure I didn't do it completely perfectly, but the longer this is, the more blending happens. So if you've checked these animations out, for example, just in general, you'll see they actually have more frames than when we test them out here. That's because blending actually happens. So, that's quite important to keep in mind. So you can play around with these values. to decide how much blending you actually want to see. It's the same camera motor, so that's all going to be the same. Now what we do need to change though is the collider. So we're on Vault Small here. Let's drag in Vault. Let's drag in Vault as well. And change camera mode, it goes back to the same one. No difference. And there we go. That's it. Really simple, straightforward. Now let's do that again. So we're going to go to Slide. Going to add a trigger. So the trigger again is player enter. Going to hit conditions, going to remove them, and going to copy these over. There we go. Let's drag them here just to make sure they're actually, grouped together with the actual object. And here in our actions, we need to do the same thing again. So need to make sure we're using the correct animation. Slide. There we go. Now for sliding, it's the same as for vaulting because this takes a bit longer. I played around a bit. Again, I had 0.25 here, which means more blending, which means less frames. Not really sure that was the perfect result, but we can try that out. In Box Glider, we need to make sure we're dragging in Vault here. There we go. Just wanted to be sure. And here we need to do the same thing. So it needs to be Slide. I did do Slide, right? Yeah. And we are changing the camera motor to Slide. Perfect. So this took a lot less time to set up, so let's give this a go and see if it all worked out right. There we go. So we're going to vault over this, and we didn't actually slide under this one, and let's see why we didn't actually slide under this one. And I'm pretty sure I completely forgot to drag in the trigger. Yeah, there we go. So there were no conditions. Let's do that again. So vaulting, sliding, and there we go. So as you can see, because blending was a bit higher here, we missed a couple of the lost frames. But that's completely up to you. I added blending a bit just because we're faster in action, but that's optional. So now these were incredibly easy to set up because we're basically doing the same thing. It's all animation work, nothing really different. Now climbing is going to be different though, and yes, this is still a actual vaulting transition, but as you can see, this is blocked, so our character wouldn't actually be able to move here because there will be an object blocking him. So we'll need to do this one slightly different. So I will still copy over these same conditions. Let me do that again. So copy, and we're going to copy these over. I'm going to move them in the right spot as well. And I'm just going to remove these actions here. So I'm just going to delete them, and we're going to create a new set. Now a lot of this will still be similar in the beginning, but I want to explain why we're doing different things as well, as we are moving a different form of, well, movement for this one. So we'll still have players controllable as turned off. We're still going to do a change in state, but we'll be using multiple animations here for climbing over. So let's go to climb. And climb up is the one we're going to use. So let's make sure this is an animation. So this will be climb up. So it's a transition. It's not necessary. It just makes it look a bit smoother. So we have the transition time as well. I'm going to add a small weight here. 0.1. We are still going to turn off the collider. So let's go to Object, Box Collider. There we go. Still going to disable that. So that's going to be the same. But here we are going to, well, we can copy this one now. We're going to change transition again. And I'm not sure it was this one, so I hope it's this one. But let's give that a go after. And we'll find out ourselves if this was the correct one. We're going to do that after we've done this one. I'm going to add a small weight here, so that's just simply for that transition, and we're going to add a new animation yet again. Now this one is going to be quite a bit longer, so in this animation we're actually on the ledge and climbing over and dropping. So because that takes a bit longer, we will need to do a bit more. Now I want to change the camera during this longer animation. So change camera, I'm going to take climb here. Pretty sure it was climb, yeah. And add that transition as well, but we're going to make it a bit longer this time around because we have more time, because we're going to give this a 1.5 seconds. Now this seems a bit long, doesn't actually take that long while playing, you'll see that in a bit, but that's why we can give a bit more time to the transition as well, and it will just look better. Now after that 1.5 we're going to do another player state, but we're going to already go back to resetting. So our animation work is over here, but we take a slightly different approach. So even though our animation work might be over, we now still need to move. Now because we're moving up and it's all animation triggery, nothing is really happening during this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a move, and we're going to do a transform move. So yeah, the transform move is a bit different, so we're going to do a transform, and this will be to a marker as well, and this will be our climb over marker. Now a transform move like this is basically, well, it's basically teleportation. Now because it's basically teleportation, this needs to happen really fast. I think it could be faster, but I'm pretty sure this is actually enough. Then we are going to change our camera motor again. So where's camera? There we go. Going to drag in our default one. There we go. And yeah, I'm pretty sure this is close to it. So let's just make sure our colliders are back on and we can control our player again. There we go. Now because this is slightly different and we'll rely a bit on this for the normal climbing as well, I want to give this a try before we continue. So let's make sure we covered everything. I think I actually need to change this one to 0. We have our conditions, and we don't have a trigger. So let's make sure we have a trigger. Otherwise not a lot is going to happen. Cool. So going to hit play and let's see. So we have our character. Now if I'm not running, by the way, this is what happens. On player enter, nothing happens. So just wanted to point that out. We're just walking into it and nothing really happens. So if we're not running, we can't parkour. And there we go. And we're climbing over. Perfect. Now, climbing over and climbing on actually has pretty much the exact same actions, even though we are doing something quite different. Now, for climbing on, I've experimented a lot. I've used teleport, I've used so many different things. Teleport has one big downside. You can actually see a sort of glitch moment. That's what I'd call it. I'm not sure that's the best way to describe it, but there's definitely a sort of glitchy moment there going on, which will, well, it will basically just not look that smooth. I've tried markers on top. In the end, using the player markers is the best way. That way, if you're not, again, if you're in a different angle, it will still work. So tried a lot for this. Took a while to figure it out, but it definitely is the best way to go about this. So I'm just going to copy these same climb over conditions as we're doing pretty much the exact same thing. Let's just group them together. Just to be clear, this doesn't actually make any difference whatsoever. They don't have to be here. Just think it looks better. So once it comes to the actions, a lot of it here is the same. So player still not controllable. Climb up is going to be the same. We have the same 0.1 wait time. We do the same component collider, just needs to be a different object this time. So it's going to be the climb on. Our player is still going to go through the same transition here. So again, this is a transition animation. It's not necessary, it just looks better. Going to have the same 0.1 weight here again, so not really a difference. Will look pretty much the same. This one, however, is going to be different, so we're no longer climbing over, we're climbing on. We're using the same 0.25 blending time, so that's all going to be the same. Same camera motor. This takes less time though, because we're only climbing on top of it, we're not going all the way over, so that's this wait time. So that reduces a tiny bit. Then once we get there, we are still going to reset the player and we are going to move to a different marker. Now this marker will be climb on. Same low value, and there's no, well, we can play a bit with the offset. I'm not really sure if that was necessary. We're just going to try it like this. I honestly really can't remember if I had to do that, yes or no. Going to go back to the same motor, that's all the same. Just need to make sure it's the same collider again. So the climb on one, and our player will be controllable. So pretty much exactly the same. I'm going to try this out because I'm not entirely sure about that offset anymore, so I want to give that a go. And before we do that, obviously we need to make sure we have the conditions again. So let's try this out. And yeah, that works. Just need to change that offset. I'm not going to try that out again, as we know it's the same issue as with climbing over. So climb on needs all of these turned on as well, and that's really it. Might be that I had to do an offset as well, not entirely sure, but we'll just keep it like that. So yeah, that's climbing on. As you can see, there was no glitchy parts. Not going to hit play again, it will work just fine now that we've turned these on, and we're going to go over to jumping just to save a bit of time on this already long video. Now climbing, jumping actually has a bit more, so this is slightly trickier, and if you're not really interested in having this this type of cinematic jumping instead of manual one, you can actually completely skip this. but I'd recommend, you know, just trying it out, see if you like it. You could always use it for some cutscene or whatever to have some cinematic actions going on there. So I'm going to add the same trigger, going to add our conditions. Now these are a bit shorter, a bit different, so I'm just going to do a new set here, just you know, manually create it instead of copying over. And being pressed, there we go. We have our actions. Oh, sorry. So this one is slightly different because I want the camera to pull back a bit more. The reason for that is, you know, we have this cliff here, we have this opening between two buildings. So to get that feel a bit better, we will actually change the camera a bit sooner this time around. So we're going to go to our jump motor, going to have a transition time of 0.5, so keeping it short but still smooth. And we're going to change our character state here again, animation clip, and this is going to be, God, I don't really remember. I think I used this one. So there's several different ones here. So you can, there's animations that have the normal jump up, down, etc. There's a normal one for a complete roll and one with a roll at the end, parkour style. I think I used normal. Not really sure anymore. So we'll just give this a go. Going to remove the transition time as this needs to happen fast because we're already at the cliff. Otherwise it won't look all that good. Going to add a weight here. And let's make sure this one actually has all of these turned on before I forget. This definitely needed that offset. There we go. Now, this is the cheating we're doing here. You don't need to do that if you're going to use teleport instead of move. But just keep in mind, if you use teleport, because, you know, again, root motion is not supported. If you use teleport, you will have that small glitchy effect. Personally, not a big fan of that, so that's why I'm using move. But there's actually a gap here, so I need to cheat and turn on this collider. This is definitely not ideal, so if you prefer using teleport, I'll show where teleport is as well. So I'm going to use the same transform move again, but if you prefer not messing with colliders, you can use teleport. Just keep in mind you'll have a small glitchy effect. It's a downside to everything. But yeah, I'm just going to use move here and do it with a collider. Again, this is something I've messed around with. It's completely optional, but you know, look at it this way: if you're only going to use it for a couple of cinematic actions, it's not really that much trouble. So yeah, I'm going to use that. I'm going to change this one to 2.4. Perfect. And I don't think we had a rotate here. Duration here is 0.9. This is a long animation, and we're doing this, you know, during after the animation, so at the same time. Going to do a weight here. Straight away, we're going to turn off that collider. We want to make sure there's not actually something here. And this is the collider I mentioned, by the way, just to be clear. So this is the one. So yes, it's definitely cheating, but it just looks better than with teleportation, because it's just, yeah, looks a bit off, looks a bit weird. And we're going to reset our state here. So I'm going to add state, reset, and there we go. So this one can take some time because we already landed, so some blending is completely fine here, no issue with that. Going to change our camera motor again. Let's just copy that over. Camera motor. And we can copy this one over as well, and it's controllable again. Now, this is quite some work. Just, just remember that just like with everything else, once you've set this up once, you can just endlessly copy it over all over your scene. So copy paste anywhere. So it's just setting it up once. That's why I have all of these in, this order, just to show the different options. Once you've done it, it's all reliant on the collider, so you can just copy paste, copy paste. It's just setting it up once takes a bit of time. Perfect. Now that's the jumping. We have one other one, which is going to be for this object here, and that's actually going down. Again, this is the same type of cinematic approach, so it's using that trigger again. If you end up wanting manual jumping, just don't do this and just change the animations. So this will have a trigger as well. Not really sure why I didn't add that here. That's interesting. Just going to drag it down here. It's a bit better. Trigger, player enter. And yeah, this will be a shorter one. It's not really that much you need to do here. Going to do a lot of the same actions. So roll. Small transition time. Going to move our guy again. This time we're using the traditional move because we are moving down. And we're going to go to the same vault slide we set up before. So let's make sure this is player, marker, and vault slide. Wait until it arrives. Needs to be turned off just to be sure. And yeah, let's actually make sure there's an animation. So let's drag this up above. And this is the land roll one, if I'm correct, and I hope I am, but we'll find out soon enough. There we go. Going to add a weight. It takes a bit of time, you're doing an entire roll, so it needs some time. I'm going to do a reset state here again. There we go. This one will have a small blending, so we're all good there. Going to change the motor back to the regular one. There we go. Same transition time, that's, well, in my opinion, long enough for this one. And then we just want our player to be controllable again. Turned on. And let's make sure it's turned on for this one as well. All good. Now I'm pretty sure I made a mistake here. This should just be 0. And we don't actually do any root motion for any of them, so I'm pretty sure this has to be off as well. Now let's make sure this is actually on for our landing. And yeah, I'm pretty sure we covered everything. Now I know this has been a bit long. Just keep in mind you can just, you know, endlessly copy paste this over, and yeah, we should be good here. So there we have it. And perfect. So that was actually the whole track. So glad I turned those things back off. So yeah, that's it. That's the entire parkour set. So I know this was a bit of a setup, but yeah, the important thing here is that, you know, you set it up once and you can just use it endlessly. And pretty much everything here relies on animation trickery and movement, which is a good way to get it going. Took me a while to, you know, find out how to do all of this basically, but it's been really fun, and it's really good to see how powerful Core Game Creator really is. There's so much you can do just with Core Game Creator. It's really impressive, and it just allows for so much. So hope you enjoy this. Hope it was at least a bit faster to set up with the scene already made available. And again, everyone on Patreon can just download the entire setup. But yeah, you will still need the animations, just as an FYI. Animations not included. So thanks everyone for watching. If you did enjoy this, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.